Update. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to live with brother-in-law anymore? My husband 32M, and I have been married for 2 years. His dad and stepmom are going through an ugly divorce. So his half-brother 17M has moved in with us to live for a year, till he starts college. My husband loves his brother, treats him like a little kid, and is overprotective of him. I find brother-in-law's behavior obnoxious, and we are having too many arguments over this. He's been with us for only a month and a half, and I can't stand it, and I really don't think I can put up with it for a year. It started off with him making messes and throwing away leftovers. Since I do most of the cooking and cleaning, it was increasing my workload. My husband's list of chores have not increased by his presence, so he was dismissive of my complaints. Since husband wasn't saying anything, I tried telling him to pick up after himself. Brother-in-law retaliated by spanking my butt. Anytime I tell him to do something, he hits my butt hard and laughs. Husband told him to knock it off, but he keeps doing it, and husband treats it as if he's just playing around. No big deal. Not only is it very disrespectful, but it's really painful. After that, he started randomly picking me up and carrying me around. I am a little over 5 feet and 120 pounds, and he's a tall, stocky guy. I hate it, and husband just thinks he's goofing around and trying to be friends with me. I work from home, and the other day when it was just him and me in the house, he picked me up and ran with me to my bedroom and threw me on the bed. It really scared me, but he just laughed at me and left. Husband thinks I am being dramatic by being scared by this. I feel like his behavior is escalating, but my husband tells me to act like the adult and not blow up over a kid's playfulness. I am anxious every day, and I am seriously thinking of moving out, though it'll be difficult to afford it. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband that I don't feel safe in our home? Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments and validating me. My husband had me confused and believing that I was overreacting. I am so relieved to hear from so many people that this is as dangerous and bad as I feel. I have packed a bag in my car and some important belongings and documents. I am 29F for those who asked. I forgot to put that in my post. I called and talked to mother-in-law early in the morning. She's always been very nice to me, and at my wedding she told me she thinks of me as her daughter. My mom passed away when I was young, and I don't have any siblings, so that had moved me very much. I was nervous about talking to her because I didn't want to ruin that relationship. But she was so shocked when she heard the details. She said she'd talked to my husband and father-in-law, and this was an unacceptable situation, and told me to come stay with her till it got resolved. Brother-in-law is out with his friends till tomorrow for 4th of July, so it gives me some time to have one more detailed discussion with my husband. I am also going to show him this Reddit post, and hopefully his mom's talk, and these comments will be a wake-up call. Update 2. I am very appreciative of everyone who commented on my last post and gave me encouragement. I won't be able to respond to all, but I appreciate it. I wasn't able to resolve this issue with my husband, and I have moved out. I am trying to come to terms with the fact that this is the end of my marriage. My mother-in-law was on my side and talked to my husband about this situation. But he got more annoyed with me because he saw this as me creating more drama between mother-in-law and father-in-law and causing old grievances to rise. I showed him the Reddit post I made and the comments, and he accused me of presenting things in a lurid manner to get people on my side. He didn't even read all the discussions, just got enraged and closed the tab. Mother-in-law also talked to father-in-law, who came down on brother-in-law about his behavior. Father-in-law told brother-in-law to leave our house and move in with him. Brother-in-law refused, saying he wants to stay with my husband. My husband came up with a solution that brother-in-law was to stay in his room and I should stay in my bedroom, lock the door, and not get out till he got home from work. This pissed me off more. I had packed a bag and my documents thinking of leaving anyway. Father-in-law talked to me and said that he doesn't like that we aren't getting along, and brother-in-law will no longer stay with us. But the next day brother-in-law came into the house with a group of his friends. I simply grabbed my laptop and left. I am so grateful to the people who had suggested that I be packed and ready to go. I already had everything in my car and could leave with what I needed immediately. I am staying with Mill now. She is flabbergasted by my husband, who's told her that he'll never ask a close family member to leave his house. It is clear that my husband doesn't even like me, much less care about me at all. He hasn't spoken to me since I left. I am trying to figure out what I should do next. I obviously can't stay with Mill for long, especially since I need to start the divorce process. I could move back in with my dad, but he lives in another state, and that'll make things hard. I don't have any savings, and I am short on money. The majority of my paycheck goes into half of the mortgage and utilities on our house. We have a combined joint account. I have been foolishly spending a lot on decorating the house instead of saving up, and I suppose all that is gone now. I need to figure out my money situation so I can support myself. Story 2. My wife friend-zoned me and wants a platonic companionship plus update. My wife 35F and I 35M have been married for 15 years, and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids 12, 14 we absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for them. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school, band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little sex, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult, and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little, we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer was in love with me, and that she only saw me as a best friend. That she only loved me in a very platonic way. And this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy, and let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I felt completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies. And her answer was, I don't know, and that, I have built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from. As you can imagine, this provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, I'm frustrated, and I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no sex drive and no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do, or what is it about me that is so unattractive or undesirable, and her response is always, I don't know. She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same. That she has been feeling disconnected for years, and that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only the children for now, and that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point, I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and/or sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point for any of that is to be intoxicated, which I believe is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which, to my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., and we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else, and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward, even with the hard topics, so I don't smell or feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to only be intimate or have sex when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance of not partaking in this, only when I'm high or drunk sex, because it doesn't sit well with me. I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter, and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. Update 1. I wanted to give you guys an update of how the therapy session with my wife went this week. Not sure if this is helpful or not, but I took many of the responses/comments/suggestions from my initial post and put together some things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us navigate some of the core issues that may be affecting this situation. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment. And it has been really eating me up inside, knowing my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally, mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we are 14 years old. Our long history of growing up, and how having children when she was 19 years old, me 20, significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process, and we essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies, 2 kids, now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directly mostly at my wife about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very our kids focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying, yes, it sucked, because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside of the lens of being a mother, and to try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually, and it was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She also was very clear in saying, I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends. This was huge because one of the big pieces that has caused a strain in our lives is how siloed and isolated we've been, again busy raising kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life, especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps we have no experience navigating, and even simply for enjoyment. It has always been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs that external stimuli. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session, I started to feel like there was a common denominator: the kids, in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing. So I simply asked her, do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young? I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes 2 to tango. I did feel like it was progress because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens, so we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still all very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what her plan is moving forward. Note: I had decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being a co-parenting roommate, that I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me as of now, and that she loves me immensely, and she feels bad for not being there for me as mentioned in my first post. I also brought up the brief swinging that happened, to which for the 50th time said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was something that was a mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much inexistent when we tried this. We both really have no issue to this. We know it happened. We tried it and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I will not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can, and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or require me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct in saying that I will not be accepting this dynamic, and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and is very much interested in maintaining an active intimacy and sexual relationship. I expressed how I am not going to be a convenience, and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly, and that I do want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage so long as she is as well, and that is she wasn't. It's okay. However, I will not be a part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving, and I do not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continues, that divorce will be the only outcome. Of course, tears were involved, and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still nothing was said, and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short and cold and transactional. The saddest part is realizing this dynamic already is very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife that, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate co-parent dynamic without reproach, and that it should be no mistake that I am not happy here, and I am never going to be okay with it. But I am done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself. Very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day, and we only spoke when necessary. Few days I keep this going, and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she's stressed, and she thinks something is wrong with me because I'm indifferent. I simply listened. Then I told her that this is the dynamic she proposed, and that I'm simply much like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie. It has been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her, and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way, just to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180, and let's just say, there has been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50, and she lost her shit. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, "Hey, friends go in 50-50, and as your friend, I expect nothing less." This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of I'm really taken for granted, and how her level of comfort and convenience at my expense is really overlooked. I pushed through anyways and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for, and that it's still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. I'll wrap up with this. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I am still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realization that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she pretty much neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very much cordial and amicable even to this day, and that's a very good sign. Boundaries are set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapist until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this non-biased third party really helps as a witness and as a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in a sexless, intimacy-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for all the kind words and recommendations and feedback. This will be my last post on this topic, and I wish you all the best. Update 2. I debated for a long time on whether to submit an update on this matter. A few significant changes have taken place, and I felt it would be good to not only share with you, but also to allow myself to process all of this in a uniform way. We're now almost 9 weeks in on the 180 method. I mentioned I was starting, and it started to render some positive reactions from my wife. I explained in the previous posts that she started to notice things that she previously took for granted, started to ask more about my whereabouts, and also started to notice I would go out with the kids more often without her, and she started to invite herself, to which I didn't decline. So much has changed, and it has changed for what seems to be for the better. This past Memorial Day weekend, my wife asked me if I wanted to go out for coffee because she wanted to talk to me about something. This was huge because I can't recall when the last time my wife asked to talk to me about something important. I must admit, I was very nervous and worried about what this could be about, and my mind was racing with the plethora of scenarios of what it could possibly be. Of course, I agreed, and we took some time away from the kids to have this conversation at a local coffee shop. The talk was very constructive in nature. There was a ton of insightful information about herself that helped me further understand where she is in life, both emotionally and mentally. We summarized what the core issues we are encountering are, and she asked me for help. This is new, and I cannot tell you how excited I was hearing something so sincere coming from my wife, who for the last 2+ years has been absent. So, after she was through sharing all her thoughts, I proposed a plan that I felt was right for us. This is something that I had been thinking about these last few weeks, and I was planning on bringing this up in a few months if I noticed that things were not changing for the better. This date felt like the right place to share it since it goes hand in hand with what she talked about, and it also relates to the help she was asking me for. I started by first acknowledging her feelings and her concerns. I told her they are valid, and how she feels is personal to her, and that I care that she feels this way because I don't like the thought of her being sad or depressed. I also told her that my goal still is and will always be for us to reconcile and be the happily ever after we vowed to be for each other, and that my love for her is as strong, if not stronger, as it was the day we said I do. I continued the conversation by telling her how I felt about the whole situation, read my previous posts for details, and how it affects me every day. I also clarified some things that she mentioned she was feeling because how I have been very distant and monotone transactional lately. I explained to her that I was very much trying to protect my feelings and emotions from the rejection and neglect, and that it wasn't personal. It was simply me safeguarding myself because I cannot control her. I can only control myself. This was a perfect segue way to the core of this approach, which is focused on self-accountability. I told her that for the longest time, I was always working hard to make her happy and do things that I knew she enjoyed or wanted. However, I was always met with rejection and disappointment, which caused a load of stress on me. I explained to her that I had to make a change for myself. After all, I can only control myself and make the changes that I want for myself. I mentioned how I was starting to implement new habits and routines that help edify me, all while still executing all of our shared responsibilities, including parenting, finances, and daily living activities. I explained that the goal is to continue to improve myself, both as a husband and father, learn more, and be healthier, among other things. She was very receptive to this. She told me that she sees what I'm doing, and that she is proud of the changes she has seen. She also told me how she's starting to realize that she feels left behind, and that much of the things that have affected her negatively are her own fault. Toward the end of the conversation, which was about 3 hours, there was a very high spirit of reconciliation in the room. I told her that my goal is to ultimately make this work. However, I was very clear that I was not going to live under the current circumstances. I told her that my heart wants her to be happy, even if it means elsewhere, and that I also deserve to be happy myself. I also explained that I do not want our children to grow up thinking this was okay or normal, because they deserve better as well. She told me she doesn't either. She told me she doesn't know what to do, to which I replied, let's set some clear goals, however. The goals will be for ourselves, not for each other. So, here is what we established. We are in charge of our own happiness. The key here is that she's not responsible for making me happy, and vice versa. We both need to seek what that personal plan looks like individually. Also, we're both encouraged to include each other in taking those steps if we want. But it is not required. We are in control of our own individual lives and our own journey. This means we're both responsible in finding the resources necessary to grow, change, and heal. We can definitely help one another when help is requested. However, unsolicited advice or help will not be rendered. We are responsible for communicating. This ensures nothing is left unsaid. If it was never brought up or discussed, it never happened. We're not mind readers, and we need to take ownership when we fail to communicate. Make a list of needs and wants. This gives us both clear direction about meeting each other's needs. This also gives us a choice as to what we want you to do, compromise on, or decline to do. This list also will not serve as a checklist for accountability. We made it clear we would not be bringing this list up for the purpose of arguing, and it was up to the other person to use the list as a tool for growth, transparency, or clarification. We concluded that it was up to us to decide if we will be happy doing these things for ourselves because we care, not to simply check a box. This was very important in order to establish long-term habits and not short-term band-aids, because you cannot make someone change or do something they don't believe is important. Established a deadline: Memorial Day 2025. At the end of the conversation, we concluded by setting Memorial Day 2025 as a hard stop to evaluate our lives and our progress. We agreed we would do this with a clear understanding that we will independently decide if we are happy here. If we determined we aren't happy, we will be getting a divorce. We would also both assume full responsibility for what happened should we get divorced. For example, if needs were not met, it would mean my partner chose not to meet them. This places full responsibility on each other in all areas. The whole process requires that if needs were not met, the next question should be, did we do everything to address this issue? If yes, Then we will have a clear conscience of what transpired and know we left no stone unturned. If, however, we didn't do everything to address the issue, it will mean the issue was not important enough for you or didn't care to meet those needs. This goes both ways in all areas, like everything else. We established that the main motivator for change should be ourselves, and that if we did that, we would in turn begin to see beneficial changes towards each other. The goal is to ensure that everything we are doing for one another to meet each other's needs is being done because we want to do it for our spouse, not because #ask. Isn't it? It was done because I know it makes him or her happy, and I love seeing them happy. I felt it was important to mention to her that we are no longer required to do anything for each other. It is now more of a I want to do these things for each other. Ultimately, I felt the conversation was very positive and productive. Many tears were shed and lots of hugging ensued. I know this doesn't mean or guarantee anything. However, this has never happened before, and I can honestly attribute it to the 180 method. I cannot give any more insight on this method, other than it's the only thing I did different and something new happened for what seems to be better. I've decided I will conclude and will refrain from this method moving forward as the plan now has changed. I'm planning to devote myself entirely to not only myself and my growth, but to also work on her needs and wants because I want her to be happy by my side. She said and agreed she would do the same for herself. We agreed we would help and build each other wherever we request for it, and that we will be approaching this as a team. As of today, some of the biggest changes I have noticed are her commitment to therapy and mental health. She is taking some antidepressants that are helping her. She is also more confident and in a far better mood more frequently. We have started to explore more ways of intimacy in multiple areas, such as physical touch and words of affirmation. Sex is starting to make an appearance, which is exciting. Side note. Sex was very awkward to start when you've been abstinent for so long. We've also started to work out together, which is great, and have lost weight, which is also very exciting. Overall, communication has improved, and I cannot wait to see where this leads. I hope this helps someone out there. I'm still very much interested in your feedback and thoughts on this. You all have been a huge help in giving me hope and insight into this tough journey. Trolls aside, many of you have really been instrumental in my journey both emotionally and mentally. I will not be providing any more updates until Memorial Day next year. I think it's now time to keep focusing on myself and start working on all the new opportunities that hopefully will arise with my wife. I wish you all the best in life and your relationships with those you love.